Diablo is a game that requires no introduction. Yet, as a burgeoning YouTube personality, I feel obliged to give one anyway. The game was developed by a tiny developer known as Blizzard Entertainment, and was released at the end of 1996. The game was such a revolutionary success that it spawned a whole following of games in the same genre, and has just released its fourth iteration in the series this year. A game I will note I have not yet played myself because I'm far too poor.
Help me, I'm poor. No.
Diablo consisted of a single hub area of Tristram, and 16 levels of semi-randomized dungeons leading to a confrontation with the Lord of Terror himself. The game was successful enough to also release an expansion pack. Yes, an expansion pack, not this new age DLC nonsense.
Can't you just use this recent photo?
The expansion was titled Hellfire and was developed by Synergetic Software. It would add a new class to the game as well as 8 new levels, new items, and one big quality of life improvement, the ability to run in town. This alone was reason enough to get the expansion pack. As an aside and gamer brag, I want to say I do still own my original copy of Diablo on CD, and surprisingly it does work out of the box. However, I do not own Hellfire, so I'll be playing this using the GOG version, which also runs completely error-free in 2023. Of course, no RPG is complete without the character creation screen. Diablo doesn't boast much in the way of customization options, but there are 4 classes to choose from. We can be a warrior, rogue, sorcerer, or monk. Being as I paid huge dollars for the expansion pack, I think monk is going to be the choice of the day. Anyone who understands the reference to the name, we can be friends. We are dropped into the world of Diablo right out of character creation. We find ourselves standing outside a nondescript hut, apparently having stayed there the night. This is curious, as in the lore, we don't live in Tristram, and there is an inn just like 10 feet up the road. Why didn't we stay at the inn? Did we just decide to take ownership of this house if someone killed in the events of Tristram? I'm probably overthinking this. Anyway, we start out exploring Tristram by introducing ourselves to the cast of characters we'll be interacting with throughout the game. We have Cain hanging out in the middle of town. He's our primary source of lore and identifies items for us at a small charge. You would think, being as we're trying to save the town free of charge, he could identify stuff out of the goodness of his heart, but I guess not. Cain needs to get paid. Next in town is Pepin. He's a local healer, selling potions and later stat-boosting elixirs in limited quantities. The last vendor in the city center is Griswold, the blacksmith. He does blacksmith things. Ogden and Jillian are the owners of the tavern, and Farnham is their number one customer as the town drunk.
Julian!
All 3 serve mostly as lore sources, though can be quest givers as well from time to time. Moving outside the city proper, we have Adria the Witch, living on the outskirts of town, selling magical items and such. Near the caves to the north, we have Wirt, who sells you rare items, but only at a premium fee. For a city on the brink of destruction by demons, they are all pretty concerned with getting paid. I guess bread ain't free. There is also Lester the cow farmer, living his best life near Adria's shack. He'll be part of a quest later on. With introductions complete, the time has come to enter the cathedral. Before we can enter, however, we notice a severely injured man lying outside on the ground, apparently having just escaped. In his dying breath, he informs us of a monster calling itself the Butcher. This is the same monster that took Wirt's leg and made Farnham into the mess of a drunk he is today. We take it upon ourselves to track this monster down and kill it for the good of the town.
Because that's what heroes do.
Before getting too deep into our progress, it's worthwhile to quickly explain the basic gameplay loop of Diablo for those unfamiliar with ARPGs. Diablo, being one of the first ARPGs, is extremely simplistic in its gameplay. That doesn't stop it from being extremely enjoyable to play. Essentially, you move around with the mouse, clicking to attack. There are both ranged and melee weapons, both with benefits and disadvantages. You can heal with potions, magic, or returning to town. There's also a surprisingly robust spell system that I ended up using more heavily towards the end of the game. Learning new spells is as simple as finding the corresponding tome and right-clicking on it to learn it. Each spell has a stat requirement, with higher levels requiring more and more magic stat to cast, but that is it at its most basic level. In terms of stats, you have strength, magic, dexterity, and vitality. Each of these affects things like your chance to hit, health, mana, damage, and the like. You can make these stats stronger through either leveling, magic equipment, or rare elixirs. There's a little more to this system, but for the sake of the video and playing the game really, that's all you need to know. Anyway, back to the game. We've entered the cathedral, and before long, we're bashing skeletons and wrecking zombies. This particular area of the game holds particularly strong memories for me. As a kid playing this, I tended to keep replaying new characters and rarely making it past the cathedral, so I definitely got the most hours out of this area. I also find the quests in this area much more well fleshed out than the rest of the game. Speaking of quests, we find our first real point of interest on level 2 of the cathedral. There is a small crack in the wall we are able to enter that takes us to a cave housing the town's water supply. It is infested with demons, and the water is yellow with corruption.
Slime! It's a river of slime!
Clearing the cave of monsters, we see in real time the corruption leaving the water. We return to town to get more information where Pepin lets us know that the demon's mere presence was corrupting the water. He also gives us a ring for our efforts. Back into the cathedral, we come across our first big challenge. There is a room that we can see is littered with corpses and gore from the outside. This has to be the home of the butcher. Opening it up, we find the butcher within. There's no fanfare for this demon. He just sees us as more meat for his collection. Being an absolute beast, we kick the butcher to death with our bare feet. We are rewarded with his cleaver, but being a monk who prefers kicking things, we deposit it on the ground in town. Coming to the final floor of the cathedral, we meet an odd goat man named Garbad the Weak, who pleads with us not to kill him, and lets us know that if we spare his life, he will craft us something of great power. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I totally forgot about this guy and continued my playthrough for several hours before going back to see him. Despite the fact that I was now probably 20 levels too high for this place, Garbad still decides to double-cross me and try to wipe me out with his amazing mace he crafted. We decide he needs to burn for his misdeeds. With Garbad a smoldering heap, the next area down is the catacombs. This next area is a bit darker and tougher than the one we just passed through. There are many more of the goatmen on these floors who prove to be an absolute pain in the ass with their constant desire to run away.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
About halfway through the catacombs, we come across a strange book with a creepy poem about blind creatures.
I can see what you see not, vision milky, then eyes rot. When you turn, they will be gone, whispering their hidden song. Then you see what cannot be, shadows move where light should be. Out of darkness, out of mind, cast down into the halls of the blind.
Backtracking a bit, we find a previously closed wall now open and weird yellow men attacking us. These enemies, while creepy, prove almost no threat and have probably the most satisfying death sound and animation of any enemy in the game. Sounding like an exploding rotten tomato as you collapse their heads with your staff. After clearing out their den, we are rewarded with an amulet and continue deeper still. We find the study of a surprisingly non-hostile sorcerer named Zar the Mad. He seems friendly enough at first, even offering us a spellbook free of charge. However, further exploring the library makes him upset, and he attacks. This was likely one of the most frustrating bosses in the game for me as a purely melee character. See, Zar likes to teleport, and he has no shortage of charges for that spell. So each time you get close, he teleports away and casts a fireball at you. You are lucky if you single strike lands before he's across the room again. This cat and mouse game with him goes on for so long that I actually have to portal out of the catacombs, refill my potions, and head back in.
Sad.
Anyway, once he's dealt with, we head down to the next section of our descent. We find ourselves next in some underground caves.
It is hot down here.
However, this is the perfect chance for us to take a break from the main quest and return to do the expansion content from Hellfire. We return to town and talk to Lester the farmer, who tells us he's having trouble with some sort of weird growth in his field. He gives us a bomb and asks us to deal with it. I have no idea why this farmer has a bomb in this medieval fantasy setting game, but let's just go with it. Blowing up the growth reveals it to not be a plant, but some sort of demon bug hive. Being a fearless Grandmaster monk, we dive headfirst into the nest to clear it out. We did make a promise to Lester and his cows after all. There's nothing too remarkable to say about the nest. It's a fun dungeon to romp through, and has the gooey texture of a bug hive that I've been conditioned to expect as a gamer, but nothing really happens besides standard bug squishing gameplay. On the final floor we come across a bipedal insect, king, named the Defiler, who apparently cannot only speak perfect English, but also smell our terror.
Closer, morsel. I smell your terror, and I hunger.
We give him a Garbad-style roasting, and pull a map from his charred remains. The map we retrieved leads us back to the surface into the cathedral graveyard, where we find a secret entrance to the crypt. This is another dungeon crawl through demons and the occasional lich, another enemy fond of running away. Much like the nest, this dungeon is fun and enjoyable to play, but not too much happens besides some good old-fashioned demon slaying. We do get some exposition as to what's going on in the form of abandoned journal entries. Apparently a sorcerer accidentally summoned a demon, Nakrul, that is beyond his abilities. The demon is imprisoned, but obviously has some sway as the crypt is so rife with his minions. Making our way to the chamber trapping Nakrul, we find a series of spell books. Now, it is obvious this is some sort of puzzle and I'm supposed to hit them in an order. However, that sounds like too much brain power for me, so I just hit buttons at random. This strategy works, and the door bursts open. I'm not sure if I did something right, or if Nakrul just got tired of me doing it wrong and smashed through. Nakrul himself is surprisingly weak. I take him down on the first attempt by smashing him about the knees with my monk staff. He explodes into a pile of liquid gore and drops a new staff for me to use. That marks the end of the expansion content. It's a bit anticlimactic, but it proved a nice diversion from the main quest. With the bugs and ancient evil threats put to bed, we return to the caves via a shortcut we opened earlier. Returning here after the adventures we just had makes us far stronger than we were before, so the enemies prove no threat for our new beatstick. The only quest we receive for the caves is from Adria the Witch. She wants a big black mushroom to brew some sort of potion she's making. We find the mushroom guarded by a pack of monsters weirdly reminiscent of Rhino from Spider-Man. Grabbing the mushroom, I quickly discover that it makes a funny noise when you drop it. Being as I have the sense of humor of a 4-year-old, I find this hilarious and proceed to drop and pick it up repeatedly while giggling to myself.
Whoa. 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 Whoa.
Once we bring the mushroom back, Adria lets us know that Pepin is also working on a potion and could use our help. He needs a demon brain. Being as we are experts in smashing in the heads of living creatures, like their forgotten Halloween pumpkins, we make haste at retrieving the brain. Delivering it to Pepin, he's grateful, but lets us know he already made the elixir and that we can drop it to Adria. We return to Adria to find that she did whatever she was doing, also without Pepin's elixir, and that we can just keep it. This was quite the fetch quest, but the elixir proves to be a huge help and gives us a permanent boost to all of our stats. Nothing more of much value happens in the caves, and we make our way to the final biome of this descent. Descending the bone staircase, we find ourselves in the very pits of hell itself. This biome is probably the darkest thematically of the entire game. Rather than the burning pits you might expect, you instead find cold, dark hallways filled with corpses and monsters, giving it an eerie, even disturbing vibe. The monsters on offer here include armor-clad knights, evil sorcerers, and an alarming number of succubi. At this point in the game, I have discovered trying to chase ranged enemies as a melee character is a losing battle, so I decide to start using some of the magic I've been investing stat points in. I make heavy use of the firewall skill to destroy succubi and sorcerers alike. I enjoy the irony that I, a monk fighting for good, has taken it upon himself to bring Hellfire into a fireless hell. Guarding our escape from the first floor is a lovely fellow named the Warlord of Blood. He attempts to intimidate us by talking about singing.
My blade sings for your blood, mortal, and by my dark masters it shall not be denied.
He proves literally no threat, and we summarily beat him until he becomes an empty husk. Throughout our journey, many of the townsfolk have been mentioning someone named Lazarus, the priest responsible for many of the deaths of the villagers at the start of this demonic attack. We find his staff and bring it to Cain, who then reveals himself to be the last member of the Herodrum, an order dedicated to safeguarding the secrets of a timeless evil, in his own words. He reveals to us that Lazarus has kidnapped the king's son and is likely using him as a sacrifice to Diablo. We return to Hell and enter Lazarus' lair. A few teleporter traps later, and we're face to face with the Dark Priest and some of his succubus minions. He talks a big game, but we find that he burns as easily as the rest, and is soon nothing more than ash in the wake of the Fire Monk.
Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
With Lazarus dead, there's just one stop left: Diablo's lair. The entire floor is a gauntlet of enemies and switches that need to be pressed to open up the way to the final battle. Once we open that gate, we find Diablo is not alone. He's supported by many of his minions. He is surprisingly simple to separate from the crowd using our trusty firewall, and we get him alone in the entry corridor. We engage in fierce mortal combat, but Diablo proves to be no match for the power of our mighty staff, and after a really cool death animation, we are treated to one final cutscene. It turns out Diablo is stored in a soul stone, and the only way to contain him is to put that stone into ourselves. With no other options, we jam the stone into our head and the credits roll, with the exact fate of our hero left to the imagination. Well, at least until Diablo 2 would release a few years later. There isn't much else to say about this game that hasn't been said. The Diablo franchise is still going strong to this day, with much of the same mechanics that made the original so great carrying over into future iterations. It really is Blizzard in their glory days, breaking new ground in a franchise that would carry them for decades to come. Before this video, I had not played the original Diablo in likely 15 years, even longer since a playthrough of Hellfire, and I think my biggest shock was just how short the game actually is. I recall playing it when it was new, and it just captured my childlike imagination as this sprawling dungeon crawler, and in my memory this game was this massive adventure. In reality, the base game is only 16 levels long, with a handful of quests interspersed throughout. Even Hellfire only adds 8 more levels and a couple of quests. That said, the replayability in this was huge, with different characters, randomized layouts, and quests each time kept it feeling fresh. It even had something relatively rare at the time, a New Game Plus mode. A mode I made use of in this very video to capture some footage of the Skeleton King, a quest that was sadly absent in my original playthrough. I do think ultimately that is what made the Diablo series, and really ARPGs as a whole, so beloved. It's that quality of a game where you finish it and the first thing you want to do is play through it again. This is something that many modern games lack, and why Diablo is worthy of your time even today. The version I played here came from GOG and ran wonderfully the entire time, so accessibility is not a barrier to playing this game. The only thing stopping you from experiencing this masterwork of retro gaming is $13. If you made it here to the end, thank you for watching. If you liked the content in this video, feel free to leave me a like or even subscribe. If you hated it, be sure to call me lots of hurtful things in the comment section in an attempt to break me as a human being. I'll leave you with this footage of Griswold living his best Tristram life. See you in the next one.